All right. Welcome, everybody, to Colchester and our first Democratic gubernatorial primary candidate forum for the Democratic Party. Thank you for all being here tonight. It's so good to see such a large and engaged audience in late May as we look at elections in August and November. Along with all of you that are here in the building, we also have Town Meeting TV live streaming the event and recording it. It'll be available on their website in just a day or two. I'm Dan Fingas, the Executive Director of Vermont Conservation Voters. We are one of the many groups that are presenting this forum tonight, and it's being presented by Let's Grow Kids Action Fund, Planned Parenthood Vermont Action Fund, Rights and Democracy, Vermont Conservation Voters, Wienberg, Vermont Chapter of the Sierra Club, Vermont NEA, and ACLU Vermont. Yeah. Collectively, our organizations work to educate their membership and voters about critical issues in our state, including in the areas of climate, education, democracy, healthcare, human rights, economic justice, and so many more. With the state of our country and the world, this year's elections could not be more critical. It's critical to the future of our state. It's critical to protecting Vermonters. And so we are so happy to welcome these two Democratic candidates for governor, Amanda Janoo and Allie Richards. This is our first gubernatorial forum. We are also doing one in Virgins on June 17th and planning one in Rutland in mid-June as well. We hope to get to a lot of questions tonight on a lot of different topic areas, but we're doing more than one because we know that there are so many important areas right now, and we won't be able to get to every single question that folks have. The format tonight will include 4-minute opening statements from each candidate, followed by predetermined questions from the organizations who sponsored the forum, with alternate two-minute answers from the candidates. We have a timekeeper up here at the front, and he is going to have a 30-second and a stop sign. If the candidates run over their stop sign by a few seconds, I'll probably say something and ask them to try to wrap up their thoughts. The final half hour of the forum will feature questions from the audience. We have taken some questions through the registration form, and we'll do some of those, but we also have cue cards, which were at the registration table, and staff will also have them later in the forum through the audience. If you have a burning question and want to write it down, they'll bring it up to me. We'll get to as many questions as we can. We will also use both the questions that were submitted and those questions to help us decide the questions for the next gubernatorial forum. And lastly, we'll finish with concluding statements from the candidates. If we stay on time, we're going to hear probably about 15 different questions on diverse topics. So hopefully you all are ready to hear about the visions that both Allie and Amanda have for our states. So let's get started. We did a very random draw, and Amanda is going to be going first with introductions. Amanda, you have 4 minutes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Janoo. I've always been an optimist, and it was really just last year that I flirted with a bit of nihilism and despair for the first time. That kind of despair that makes you wonder, whether this matters or if we've already lost in some way. Because I, like all of you, have been watching the rise of fascism in our country, the growing threat of World War, detention centers, the military deployed against our own citizens. And I kept asking, what was the point of all of those Holocaust movies if we can't see the writing on the wall right now? And while our democracy feels like it's being dismantled, piece by piece, our planet is on fire, and it's difficult because it feels like we don't even have the energy or bandwidth to deal with that existential crisis right now. But the thing that got me out of this despair was recognizing that I've lived in enough dictatorships to know that once civil liberties are lost, they're really hard to get back. And that the anxiety we're feeling is intentional, that they're manufacturing a sense of helplessness, and they're counting on us keeping our heads down and looking away. But I've never been one to do as I'm told. And I really do believe that, the way to combat despair is through action. And the ways in which we will combat tyranny is through democracy. And so I'm running for governor because I believe that Vermont can really show a different way forward for our country. And because in Vermont, neighbors show up for each other. And I know we can build an economy that does that too. One that meets our needs and ensures our communities have a real voice over the future. Because I grew up in South Stratford, Vermont, which is like a small rural town in the Upper Valley. And I would always attend the town meeting with my parents every year and watch our community debate and decide on everything from how much money should go to the roads and schools to whether there should be GMO labels on our foods or nuclear reactors in our state. And that was my introduction to politics and my introduction to economics. And it's how I learned that these systems are always best designed when they are truly governed by the people and for the people. And it's also how I'm able to realize that the crises we face, both our democratic and our economic crisis, are two sides of the same coin. As for decades, power has been allowed to concentrate upwards, whether that's in the hands of multinational corporations or billionaires who are now actively buying our government. But it's important to recognize that this is why when people don't feel like they have power, like when our healthcare systems are collapsing, our communities are being hollowed out, they lose faith in democracy. And something ends up filling that void. And it's often cynicism, it can often be fear, or it can often be authoritarianism. But Vermont has never been a place that allows our fate to be dictated by the powers that be. And I took the values from growing up in Vermont, and this is why I've always spent my career working with communities and governments around the world and across this country to support bottom-up economic development, to support our local industries, to keep more wealth circulating within our local economies, to build stronger supply chains and more diverse and resilient economies. And it's the reason why since I launched, every place I've gone on this campaign, I've asked, what are the things you're most proud of in your community? Because I believe the solutions are already here. We can find the solution to our healthcare crisis in Addison County, where the majority of people overwhelmingly voted for free universal primary care. We can find the solutions to our housing crisis, just over with the Champlain Housing Trust. I know that together we have everything we need. And I believe that Vermont, if we're willing to be bold and brave, can really illustrate a different way forward. Thank you.
Allie, 4 minutes.
Hi, everyone. It is so great to be here in beautiful Colchester on a perfect spring evening at the Meeting House. It's a good place for democracy, I think. And the energy of a sold-out room like you all are here today, and all the great organizations that brought us here, and the coalitions you all have brought together for so many years. What I see is you all are fighting with everything you've got for Vermont. And you deserve a governor who is going to fight just as hard as you all are fighting, with the same vigor and persistence. And that is why I'm running for governor of this great state, my home, to fight like hell with all of you for what's right. So I grew up in Vermont, like Amanda, in a small dirt road in the Forgotten East in Orange County, Newbury, Vermont, because my family thought Vermont was the best place to raise a family. And they were right. You know, we watch out for each other. We pull each other out of the ditch. That's the Vermont way. My grandfather was in the Navy in World War II. He had an expression, one hand for yourself, one hand for the ship. And he really turned it into his life motto. It's how I was raised. If you think about it, it's sort of everything. Take care of yourself, enjoy this life you've got, but leave a little behind for the collective struggle. That's Vermont, freedom and unity. And growing up in Vermont, that really worked for me because it instilled this deep sense of community. The sense that we can do anything when we put our differences aside and work together. So like many of my friends and peers, I left Vermont after graduation, hoping to change the world. And I very quickly realized real change starts at home, at a place like this, where even if you disagree, you talk to each other. You find the common ground. You don't leave the table until you've moved forward. That's Vermont. So I came home as fast as I could. And I started talking to all kinds of Vermonters, working for the governor, and listening to what we care about, you care about, like the ability to live here without being crushed by costs, the ability to raise a family here, access to good paying jobs. I quickly realized at the root of so many of these things that we care about was the lack of access to high quality, affordable childcare. So I rolled up my sleeves and got to work with many of you, actually, I can see in this room, which is so heartwarming. 40,000 people in Vermont came together. Business owners, parents, early childhood educators. We came across party lines and we delivered the most significant childcare bill in the country. But here's the thing, folks. That's just the beginning. We are not done yet. When I took my head up and realized, after a decade of fighting this crisis in Vermont, Vermont by every other measure is less affordable. Our healthcare costs are crushing us. You can't find or afford a house. Our Vermont that we choose in to raise our families in the community that we love is slipping away. And I'm not going to spend one more time on the problem because we all know the problem. The question is, what are we willing to do about it? Because we have common sense in Vermont. If you can't afford to live here, there's a problem. You got to ask yourself, are you better off than you were 10 years ago? We deserve a governor who's not a goalie swatting things away. It is time for a strategic offense. We need a plan. We've done it before and we can do it again. So I helped harness the voices of thousands of Vermonters 10 years ago around a single goal. Childcare is essential to our economy. We need to take that same focus, the same elbow grease to every single one of the issues that are pressing us here in Vermont. And that's what I'm excited to speak to you all today on those very issues. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Allie. The first question goes right into what you were talking about, Allie, and you're the first to go. In recent years, Vermonters have seen steep increases in costs of housing, healthcare, energy, childcare, and food. In the last 12 months, Vermont's economy has lost more than 10,000 jobs. And a recent survey found that 84% of Vermonters say their family finances are getting worse or only staying the same. What specific policies do you propose and support to lower the cost of living for Vermont families? And what do you believe would deliver measurable relief in the near term?
All right, together we are going to discover how many words you can put in 2 minutes. So that's the question, folks. The entire reason I'm running is for the economy. No economy, no state, no opportunity. Everything we need to do is to stabilize our economy. I'm very proud to say that childcare is one of those things that's trending in the right direction from that list. We've got more work to do, but we showed what was possible. So for me, we approached childcare because it was a root cause issue. We need to build Vermont's economic action plan together. We have not had a state economic development plan in over a decade. So if you squeeze the toothpaste tube, you don't know where the toothpaste is going to come out. Everything is intersectional: housing, healthcare, childcare, you name it. So the whole thing goes against Vermont's action plan that we have to do together and hold ourselves accountable. So everything goes under this. Housing is a root cause issue, folks. We have to build more housing. We've agreed 30,000 new housing units. We've all agreed on that. The governor, the Rural Caucus, Chittenden County, here's where I'm getting curious. Why are we building 1,200 a year if we need 30,000 to survive as a state? Everything my administration will do is to understand the barriers of building housing and bust through every single one. Part of that is understanding vacancy, the true cost of vacancy, okay? That's a place that we can raise revenue to reinvest in our economy through building more housing. Oh boy. All right, so 2 minutes is not long. We're gonna talk about energy. It's another key part of the economic plan. I'm sure we're gonna talk about healthcare. These are the pillars of a good economic plan. We also need a workforce that cuts across everything. Every student should have a plan when they graduate. That should just be the beginning, including industry-recognized credentials, everything it takes towards this goal. And rural Vermont, it's an asset for us. It's not a drag. We can be investing in folks already doing the work, like intermediaries, like the regional development corporations, to give the technical assistance we need across communities to build the houses, to do whatever it is that is the gap that they see for their economic plans.
Thank you, Ellie. Amanda, 2 minutes. And we are going to dig into some of these issues deeper as we go through the questions. This is just the big question at the top.
Yes, well, I think, this year we're hearing the term affordability from like every politician. And it's fair enough because things are super expensive. But it is important to recognize that like not everything is unaffordable. It is our basic needs that are unaffordable. It is healthcare, housing, food, energy. And the reason for that is because you can charge as much as you want for a basic need, and people have to pay it until they reach a breaking point. So for example, I have an apartment in Burlington and my rent's increased $500 over the last 5 years. My income hasn't increased any, right? Like making it work. But I also live across from Battery Park, where a lot of my neighbors don't have a house at all, right? And so like we have reached this breaking point. And the thing I will say about any crisis is that it is also an opportunity. And I think really at the root of a lot of our affordability issue right now, the first thing we need to deal with is healthcare. As it is time for us to recognize that a profit-oriented healthcare system is not a good idea, right? Like it's a perverse incentive to have an industry that makes money off of people being sick. Because then that is their incentive. Whereas if we all pay into a healthcare system through taxes, we all have an incentive to keep people well, so we don't have to pay for as much medical care or treatments, for example. And so I think this is our moment to really finally fulfill our promise of developing a universal healthcare system, starting with universal primary and preventative care. And I think that this is something we can do immediately, and it is absolutely necessary in order to reduce the pressure not only in family budgets, but on our state budget and on our businesses budget as well, in order to allow for increasing wages to come from that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. A big topic of discussion recently has been the way that we pay for public education system. So this question is about that. Currently, about half of Vermont homeowners pay their education property taxes based upon their income and their family's ability to pay. It used to be 2/3 who paid that way. But the wealthiest Vermonters do not pay their education tax based on their income. By eliminating the residential homestead property tax and moving to an income tax for all Vermonters, and not just for working and middle-class Vermonters as we do now, we can ensure that everyone pays their fair share while providing real relief to working and middle-class folks. Do you support eliminating the residential property tax in favor of moving to an income tax for all, so that all Vermonters, including the wealthiest, pay their fair share for our children's public education? And Amanda, you'll go first.
So first of all, I think it is important to note within that question the point that was, we went from 2/3 of people having income sensitivity-based payments for their property taxes to now only half of it. And that's because the income threshold was reduced. And there is a very real, burden that is being placed on working class and middle class Vermonters right now. Our average tax has increased 40% over the last 5 years. I just think that we should be solving that through housing tax policy, not through education policy or necessarily an income-based policy. Because as Ali was mentioning, the last time we did the census, it's estimated that 23% of our homes were vacant. And out of those, 75% are estimated to be owned by out-of-staters. So if you are only taxing income, people can easily say that they're not living here 51% of the time, and so their income will not be eligible. Whereas their house will always be eligible for that tax because they can't move that, right? And so I believe we have a progressive income tax structure in Vermont, but we have a regressive property tax structure. And so we are in a moment where we need to increase taxation on second homes, vacation rentals, and luxury estates, much higher value estates, in order to reduce the property tax burden, ensure sufficient revenue for our education system, and ultimately provide the types of funding we need for other types of public services as well.
Thank you, Amanda. Go ahead, Alan.
I could not agree more. I think you're gonna hear some good trends, which means we're on the right track. Housing and healthcare are the two root causes I was speaking on about in the last question. Housing and healthcare, they're root causes. They are key drivers in our demographics, and our inability to sort of grow our tax base, and our inability to grow our way out of the problem that we are in, which is critical. So more housing means lower property taxes, more taxpayers. Lower healthcare costs means lower property taxes, because it's one of the key cost drivers driving our education. So let's talk about education. I think every idea to make our tax systems more progressive should be discussed, should be looked at. But as Amanda's saying, we have to make sure that we're truly using the tools to capture income in a progressive way, and the real conversation right at this minute to me is we're already in it, we're thick in it in the education debate. What is the value? Make sure every single student is getting a great education. Start there with the goal and tackle the costs as fast as we possibly can. And then we can be talking about different ways to pay for it thoughtfully together, 100%. But the real driver is healthcare, and we have to support more efficient delivery of education. What do I mean by that? I really think we need to support our communities to understand shared services, how they can work together to not all buy toilet paper by themselves. I don't think anyone needs to do that. But the real value is lost in this conversation. Is our kids getting an education, and how are we supporting them? The Agency of Education should be a service-oriented organization with data and supports, technical assistance, best practices for their communities. What I see today is an education system that is being torn apart, communities being torn apart because the conversation does not have the key goals at the heart of it.
Thank you. Let's switch gears a little bit, and Ellie can keep the microphone. You're going first. The federal government has taken a sledgehammer to renewable energy, including solar, which is the cheapest power to deploy on the planet. At the same time, state regulators continue to make the net metering program less affordable for Vermonters looking to go solar at home. By increasing the installation of new renewable energy like solar and wind, we can put those people to work, create a more realistic electric grid, and keep dollars in the state. In addition, in-state renewable energy is better for our economy and Vermonters than questionable out-of-state energy sources like nuclear, oil, and gas. What is your plan for the future of the state's energy use, and specifically, how to support Vermont's in-state energy economy?
Yes, we can do all those things, Dan. Okay, we have to just acknowledge climate change is the existential threat of our time. The question for me is always, what can fierce little Vermont really do about it? I think we are in a political moment right now where we can go back to being the tip of the dagger for this country on renewables, on climate change solutions. We were, and that's really, lagged for the last decade. So why is it a political moment? It's our most vulnerable Vermonters right now that are getting stuck at the pump, or getting stuck at home because they didn't have the $5,000 to move on to a pellet stove, to get an EV. They didn't have access to the upfront capital. That is wrong, and now is the moment for us to seize on this political nightmare that we are in, to say, no, we have to have energy independence in the state of Vermont. Access to creative financing for Vermonters, low-income Vermonters, middle-income Vermonters, to make sure we're actually allowing folks to move on to cheaper, cleaner energy. It's huge for our affordability crisis, and it's good for the planet. We can do that right now. What can Vermont also do? Be an incubator. Do everything we can to make sure Beta Technologies is successful, so they revolutionize green airfare. I mean, that is something Vermont can do. Do the fuel cell technology, do the battery work, build renewables like our lives depend on it in Vermont, like we used to. I see a lot of roofs that don't have solar on them right now. We can do this, we've done it before. And get ready for what is coming, okay? The 100-year flood is the 10-year flood. I live in Montpelier, I saw my town get destroyed in 2023. We can build jobs by systematically changing out all the culverts. I was mucking out like everyone else and the co-chair of the Commission for Resilience and Recovery in Vermont because I couldn't put one foot in front of the other knowing this is gonna happen again any minute. We have to rebuild better. It's gonna build jobs. It's gonna save us so much money down the road when the 100-year flood is truly, sadly, the 10-year flood now.
Thank you, Ellie. Amanda, 2 minutes.
So the question was around solar, right?
Solar, wind, renewable energy.
Yes. Okay, great. Yes. I think that this is probably one of the most urgent things that we should be working on immediately. I mean, we're all probably feeling the impacts of the rapidly increasing costs of oil and gas. Like, I just filled my gas tank. It was like $50, like crazy, right? And I mean, that is only going to continue to ripple through our economy through inflation. So things are bad now, but they're definitely going to get worse. And the point that Dan was just making, I think one of the many issues with our current governor has been he has not been a major friend of renewables. And so the net metering program that they're talking about has made it nearly impossible for us to advance community solar projects. So everything has to feed into one energy pipeline, which increases our vulnerability and also reduces the capacity for us to create more like renewable community microgrids. And I think that that's what we need to be investing in at this moment, first and foremost, to allow communities to be able to build their own sort of battery and like community renewable energy systems that they can feed into and also earn income out of. And to have that be a stacked system, because the reality is we are going to need other types of energy sources as well, like microhydro, like wind, etc. But this is critical not only for, as I was saying, our independence, right, our energy independence to improve our resilience, but it's also really important just because right now, like our major trade deficit comes from the fact that we import so much of our energy from other countries. So this is something which I think we can make huge strides on because, as I say, now increasingly and more every day, renewables are much cheaper than fossil fuels.
Thank you, Amanda. So next we're going to turn to probably not a very happy topic, but the attacks on our democracy. Last week, the Justice Department created a $1.8 billion fund to compensate Trump and allies and January 6th insurrectionists who claimed they were unfairly investigated and prosecuted. The move is also lets the president, his family, and his business off the hook in terms of future investigations of possible persecution. This is just the last example of the highly corrupt acts of the federal administration that favors corporations and super rich. Understandably, this causes voters to become cynical and disengaged. So the question for you is this: what steps will you take as governor to defend democracy, and will you specifically support redefining corporate charters here in Vermont, as Hawaii has just done, so that corporations cannot spend money to influence future elections? And Amanda's going to go first.
Nice. Yes, definitely. Very much on board. Yeah, I mean, this I think is really at the crux of it, of my entire motivation for running in this moment is this issue of the crisis of democracy. There was a quote which is attributed to Mussolini, at least, where he says that fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism because it is a merger of corporate and state power. And by that definition, we've been on this road for a little while now. As you know, since the 1980s, studies have found, so since my entire life, there's been no statistical correlation between average Americans' opinion and what ends up becoming public policy in Washington. And so this sense of cynicism in democracy is not unfounded, but what is also important to know is that while corporations and private sector interests have been influencing policy, what we've also seen simultaneously is a growth in what the OECD calls deliberative democracy. More citizen engagement directly in policymaking as a way to counteract that. And that's happening across our country, it's happening around the world. In Vermont, we already got that here. We have this tradition of direct democracy in our town meeting. And so my plan is really about, we need to start by going through a participatory process of engaging all Vermonters to clearly define what are our long-term goals for our society. So one of the countries I worked with is Wales in the United Kingdom, and they went through a process of asking all their citizens, what kind of Wales do you want to leave for your children and grandchildren? And on that basis, they articulated these 7 well-being goals centered in health and equity, culture, community, global responsibility, biodiversity, prosperity, and required all of government to work collectively towards the achievement of these 25-year targets, so for the next generation, and created an accountability mechanism of a commissioner whose tenure is always longer than any political administration or cycle to hold them to account. And what that looked like in practice was when they wanted to build a new highway through the country, they had to make the case for how it would contribute to all goals. And when they couldn't, they put a permanent freeze on all new road development, so that money would go into public transportation and active travel. So this is an example of how we can be the innovators in this country and show what true democracy looks like.
Thank you, Amanda. Allie?
There's a lot of nuance in this world, and this is one place where there's none. This is right and wrong. Full stop. There's no role for money in politics. Part of the reason I worked for the first Obama campaign, and part of the reason I ran home as fast as I could was because of Citizens United. Are you kidding me? It's the seed of destruction in our democracy, and everybody should see that now. Absolutely unacceptable. There should not be money in politics. And it's also part of my motivation for running. Part of the job of a leader is to speak with a clear voice against what's wrong in this world. Vermont, with our values, should be a beacon of hope and a model example of transparency and accountability and protecting every Vermonter and every Vermonter's constitutional rights at a time when our very democratic government is under attack. Cannot emphasize this enough. We all have a responsibility. Well, first of all, to vote. That's one thing we can all do together. It's going to take us all. Vote, vote, vote. And vote for leaders who are going to build coalitions to protect your rights. We've had to enshrine more rights in our Constitution in the last few years than in decades before because of the threat that we are all under from the federal government. Reproductive freedom. I'm so proud to have voted for that. I'm so proud to get to vote this November. I hope you'll join me for Proposition 3 and 4, enshrining the right to labor, enshrining the right for equal protection, folks. We had to come together as Vermonters across party lines, I want to add, which is great for democracy, to say, we're going to protect our constitutional rights here. I cannot wait to be a fierce and clear-voiced leader and fighter for our constitutional rights as Vermonters. Every single one of our communities and our Vermonters, our neighbors, who are woven into this landscape. There is no room for nuance on this one.
Thank you. Allie, you go first. Vermont has the highest healthcare costs in the world. On average, people living in the United States spend 7.9% of their annual income on healthcare, while in Vermont, the average is 19.6%. These healthcare costs are unaffordable and unsustainable for Vermonters. At the same time, rural safety net providers like Planned Parenthood of Northern New England are also struggling to provide the care our communities need and are being forced to close their doors due to stagnant reimbursement rates and constant attacks from the federal government. What is your vision for a sustainable future for Vermont's healthcare in the face of these hardships?
Yeah, another way to put that is we have the highest healthcare in the world, because if it's the highest in the country, it's the highest in the world. Absolutely unacceptable and a root cause issue, which is why we're so focused on it. Root cause issue. The first thing we have to do is fight for every federal dollar on healthcare that we are owed, of which there are many. We're about to lose 45,000 Vermonters off the Medicaid rolls. But it's not because of cuts, it's because they're making it much harder for Vermonters to stay on Medicaid. So what we have to do is, this is where your state government can really help you, be of service. Get out there to communities and make sure every single Vermonter is re-enrolled, is navigating the paperwork. We can get every single federal dollar Vermont is owed, and we must as a starting point, including the $195 million in the Rural Transformation Grant. That's real money that can really transform the way we approach primary care, the way we can coordinate services. That's real money for Vermont. And I do not believe we even really know about it, right? I mean, how many people even heard about this? And are we gonna spend it wisely? And are we gonna spend it at all? We have to spend it down in 5 years. We should be putting all of our effort and priority on the engagement, on how to spend that, and how to do it well with our communities. The other thing is drive down costs and keep our rural hospitals open. That should be the conversation. Not can we, can't we. Everything to keep them open, folks. These are jobs, these are emergency rooms. We've seen this happen all around the country. The hospitals have to come together and say, what are the basic needs that we have to do? Emergency rooms, basic needs, and then who's doing hips and who's doing knees. It's not perfect, it's necessary, and everywhere else in the country has done it. It should have happened 2 years ago, and it's the governor's job to do it. Hospitals are not legally allowed to do it, anti-monopoly laws, they can't. You need the governor to come and say, here you go, get the best facilitator in the world and sprint, 6 months, no problem. We also need to expand universal primary care, folks. That's how we keep people healthy. That's how we keep our costs down ultimately. Every Vermonter has to have access to universal primary care.
Thank you. Amanda?
So I would definitely agree that healthcare is a core root issue that we have to deal with, like first and foremost. I think I would disagree about the mechanisms by which we do this. I think that a state-funded healthcare system is really essential, and a universal healthcare system is the time for us to move there. Part of this is because 30% of our budget currently comes from the federal government. And I don't know if you've been seeing what the federal government has been doing in some other democratic states, but I do not want us to capitulate to this administration on the basis of budgetary considerations. And so the proposal which I've developed is based on, I've been part of, previously before running, this fair share proposal, which is about advancing a 1% income surcharge on the top 1% of income earners. And depending on the percentage surcharge, what we can definitely do is, again, inspired by local initiatives that are already happening across the state. Like in Tunbridge, for example, they've just hired their own town nurse. And this nurse, anybody can go and get free medical care. They can go and do house visits. And so I think we can advance a universal primary preventative healthcare system the Vermont way of bringing back small town doctors, nurses, and caregivers to our communities. So they are vetted within our communities to provide the best holistic preventative care. And it is estimated that this should save the state about $300 million in emergency room visits and in people just waiting so long to go get healthcare. And I think what's important here to also note is that I think antitrust laws are actually really important. And so this is also a way to a monopsony challenges monopoly, right? And so we do not want to create a further monopoly of an already insanely expensive system.
Thank you, Amanda. This will give you a little chance to expand on that because the next question is around tax fairness. With the passage of H.R. 1, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, Congress and the President have given massive tax breaks to the wealthy and corporations, putting pressure on our state's budgets for years to come and giving the top 1% of Vermonters tax breaks that average $57,000 a year. Given the massive needs in the state in healthcare, food security, transportation, and so much more, do you support tax fairness through the creation of tax brackets for wealthiest Vermonters? And what unmet needs would you want to spend the additional revenue on?
Perfect. Yes, I do. And I would want to fund healthcare. So yeah, as I mentioned, very much in support of the fair share proposal, not only as a way for us to recoup the amount of, income that people have already been able to save through the Big Beautiful Bill, but also just because within our country, within our state itself, we have very high inequality. The top 10% of the wealthiest Vermonters own almost 50% of the wealth. And inequality is not good for a society in general. If you look at mental health, safety, violence, any sort of public health outcomes, more equitable societies are better. I think we're also, we are really beautiful. Every time we've done this fair share proposal, we get a bunch of rich people who sign on to it and support it, and so I think there is a willingness of that type of generosity to contribute to ensure that we can all have nice things like free healthcare and, affordable housing, that kind of thing. And so I would just say, as I mentioned earlier, I would not only focus on increasing a progressive income tax rate, but also focus on a more progressive property tax system as a way in which to deal with the property tax burden and as a foundation for housing relief as well.
Thank you. Allie?
Absolutely. Vermont should have the most progressive tax system in the country, and we largely do. And we should continue to understand, is it keeping pace? Are there federal changes that we need to keep up with? I guess the difference is we're such a small community in Vermont. If I was running for national office, I'd run on a single payer for this country. I'd run on massive redistribution of wealth. But in Vermont, we're such a small community. We have to make sure we're understanding the balance. When we ask people to pay more, we should be darn sure it's going to be towards something that's really effective. So I have experience raising revenue for something that is effective, that's going to benefit all of us. Of course we have to invest in Vermont. Businesses came with us to say, of course we have to invest in Vermont. That's what we do in our businesses every day. We invest to grow. We invest to make a profit. And so in childcare, we didn't just raise revenue and hope for the best. We identified the problem very clearly. We identified the trade-offs. We identified how the return on investment was going to look, how it was going to benefit all of us. We maximized every dollar we could, both federally and in state. We made sure it was an efficient system. And then there was a gap. And we raised the smartest possible revenue to fill the gap. In this case, a 0.44% payroll tax that garnered support from a large coalition. So it's working, it's durable, it's out there, and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So I have the same approach to raising revenue for every other thing that we need in Vermont. What is the problem? What is the solution? Give Vermonters some assurances. It's a really good plan and it's gonna work. It's gonna benefit all of us. That's how you build a coalition to raise revenue that's gonna be durable and not cause a huge political pendulum swing. And I would spend it in exactly the same place as Amanda would. Healthcare, housing, the things that will make Vermont permanently more affordable for all of us. And we make the case to Vermonters. Why is it that important that we're raising revenue together to do these things that are gonna make Vermont more sustainable?
Thank you both. We have a couple more pre-arranged questions, and then we're going to go to online questions from the registration, but also questions from you all in the audience. Justin and Evelyn have cue cards and pens. They're going to walk through the audience during this next question. If you think of something that doesn't seem to be coming up and you want to ask a question, you can write it down, get it back to them, and we'll ask some of them right at the end. Allie, you're first up. We have a lot of challenges. On to the next one. Vermont has the 4th highest rate of homelessness in the country, with more than 4,000 people unhoused in our states, including more than 1,000 children. On April 1st, we saw more than 160 households exiting from emergency housing onto the streets, all of which include highly vulnerable individuals, such as people with disabilities or debilitating medical conditions, people fleeing domestic violence, and children. What is Vermont's responsibility to provide shelter to those in need, and what would you propose the state do to address this crisis?
No one should be living on the street. This is another one without a lot of nuance. It's a matter of humanity. I think the more and the quicker we all come together to understand that homelessness is a housing problem, the faster we're going to solve this. It's really, really well proven, folks. The vacancy rates, the mobility in your housing market. This is the direct correlation to homelessness. So the full solution to this problem is meeting our goals for permanent affordable housing. That is the full solution here. And we need to be all focused, like we started this conversation with, on that. That's gonna take us some time. In the meantime, what if we just said as a value in the state of Vermont that no one under 18 and no one over 60 is sleeping on the street? What if we said that as a value? It's a starting point. It's not everything. No one should. But we did that before for veterans. We said veterans should not be homeless, and we systematically got it done. So when we set a value, when we set a goal, we can accomplish that. So we have to have a plan. I hate to say it, but it was the governor's job to make a plan for how we were going to exit from the programming that we've had. And year after year after year, no plan. We've wasted so many years where we could have been investing that money in the permanent affordable housing that truly gets this done. I also think we have to treat it like the statewide problem it is. Burlington, St. Johnsbury, Brattleboro, they're starting to quantify the dollars, the municipal dollars that they are spending to support these populations with no compensation from the state. So really understand this as a statewide problem and do not push it to our municipalities without any compensation to wrap the social services that they need to support folks so they're not living on the street, which we really should not all be okay with as Vermonters.
Thank you, Allie. Amanda.
So in terms of like the immediate response, I mean, the fact that we are once again pushing people out of this hotel motel program is heartbreaking. And I mentioned I live across from Battery Park, and this winter there was a man who, when I was going out in the morning, had frozen to death. in the middle of the night. And these are the realities of what we are, subjecting people to because of the current priorities. And, there are amazing examples, and we know that the solution, like a housing first solution, is the most effective solution. Finland, inspired by the US, this was our idea, took it, really started investing in a housing first approach, which is where instead of like all of the money we put in the hotel motel program, for example, we could have used to just provide permanent apartments and to wrap around the services in terms of mental health, in terms of addiction, in terms of professional support or rehabilitation, etc. And that has been by far the most effective way to deal with a homelessness crisis. But I do agree that the root of this crisis is a housing crisis. I just don't agree that just building more houses is gonna solve it. And so the plan we need to advance is gonna have to be a couple more prongs here, because 92% of Vermonters aren't even eligible for a loan for the average new house cost, okay? So we need to stop private equity and corporate ownership of the housing stock, because those are the only folks who can afford it right now. We need to tax second homes and vacation rentals, because all of the new buildings are being turned into investment properties. And we need to put a lot more money into community land trusts, co-ops, and more permanently affordable housing by helping actual Vermonters with building loans, with rehabilitation loans. We have the oldest housing stock in the country. And so that we are actually helping people live in those houses permanently. I might stop, but I'll tell you more about it today.
Thank you. All right, this is the last of our prearranged questions. Thank you, Justin. And Amanda goes first. High levels of toxic PFAS forever chemicals have been found in numerous public and private drinking water supplies around the state. According to the Vermont Department of Health, PFAS are linked to high blood pressure, decreased birth weight, immune system effects, thyroid disease, kidney cancer, and testicular cancer. Nonetheless, PFAS chemicals continue to be used in a variety of products imported into Vermont, increasing people's exposure when they use those products and creating additional problems when those items are disposed of and chemicals can leach into water supplies. Do you support strengthening laws that ensure clean water for all, including stronger prohibitions on toxic PFAS pollution of drinking water and surface waters? Amanda.
Yes, absolutely. PFAS, those forever chemicals, are terrifying, first of all. I was just down in Bennington and a woman was sharing about how she's personally, her water is contaminated with PFAS. And so now she's going through a whole process of getting treatment and trying to purify her water. But I mean, in the end, really at its core, we just need to get back to some of the basics, right? Like, how do we ensure everybody has clean water, good food, healthcare, housing, transportation, Like, let's just get back to some of the basics, and I think we're gonna be all right. I think we have led on some really important legislation in our state around regulations of toxic chemicals, and now it's really about making sure that we're investing in cleaning the water sources and preventing microplastics and things like this from continuing to enter into them.
Thanks to the advocates in the room, we have such an amazing legacy to build on this. The companies push back, we push back harder. That's what you all did, that's what we'll keep doing. Again, this is a no-brainer. The late, great Senator Sears, and so many of you all helped pass the first medical monitoring bill in this country. I'm so proud of that. There are neighbors of this terrible chemical plant that still have PFAS, in their lives and their bodies, but at least the company is now held accountable to paying for their care and the monitoring so they can catch it before it turns into cancer. So there is no reason why we can allow folks to have toxic chemicals in the things they interact with, especially children. And I also want to thank folks for always pushing the hardest on getting the toxic chemicals out of all of anything that a child interacts with. We know they put their mouths on things. I see so many early educators here in the crowd. Absolutely no. So it's just common sense, and anything that we can do to protect Vermonters. It's not a new issue in Vermont, but of course we must. It's another no-brainer here for us together in Vermont.
Great. Well, we're going to move into audience questions. I'm going to start with the 2 or 3 that were most popular. There were multiple people asking on the registration, and then shift into some from the room. So, Allie, you're going first, and I think you're going to have an answer for this question because it's about childcare. Vermont has made considerable progress on childcare since the passage of the 2023 childcare bill, including the addition of new programs and an increased number of spaces, and childcare becoming more affordable for thousands of families. Gaps still remain, and childcare is still out of reach for far too many. Where do you think we go from here in terms of building a childcare system that fully meets the needs of our state?
Thank you. All right, get the 2-minute sign ready for me, please. Obviously something I'm very passionate about. It's a root cause, it's our kids, it's the smart thing to do, it's the right thing to do, and we're seeing this return on investment just as we hope. The thing that never kept me up at night was, could we pass the bill? Could we get the investment? I knew we could do it. The question was, is it gonna work? Because we wanna be darn sure it works. We're gonna take a big swing at something in Vermont. We should be taking a lot more big swings. Shame on us, we're so small. We should be taking big swings just like this because the status quo is not working. And we did it for childcare, and it's working. I mean, these numbers, 5,000 plus folks are getting life-saving, amounts of tuition assistance helping pay for childcare. Hundreds of new childcare spaces, hundreds of new businesses, thousands of new spaces. So what's next? We showed it was possible. We showed it's within our reach. We showed not only when you do this, the sky doesn't fall. It's great for your economy. It's great for your people. It's great for your kids. So what's next? Continue to expand affordability. Not every Vermonter can still afford childcare. 575% of poverty is our limit. That's better than anywhere in the country. But that's a family of 4 making shy of $200,000 a year, and it's very expensive for those who know to have childcare, especially with multiple kids. It should be a sliding fee scale, so we really live into the value that was our goal and should continue to be our goal. No family pays more than 10% of their household income. That's what makes sense here, to get rid of any cliffs. And the workforce, like any other issue, it's the workforce, folks. The magic in the room is that human with the child. And these are early child educators. They're professionals. They are the heart and soul of this important system. And here's a baby, perfect timing. We did not engineer that. That baby, you know how many neurons are being created every second, that baby? It's so important, it's worth everything we've got, folks. We're seeing the return on investment. It's a model for the rest of the country as it should be. When we get to reconstruction in this country, childcare has to be a cornerstone of when we rebuild this country, and we've shown how to do it in Vermont. We keep making progress on affordability and supporting the workforce to be respected and compensated the way that they deserve.
Thank you, Allie. Amanda.
Yes. Well, first of all, I just want to say, acknowledge all the incredible work that Allie and everybody in the Let's Grow Kids Network has done on this issue to really raise awareness about the critical importance of childcare, of our young children, of ensuring that everybody has access to that type of support when they are raising kids or when they're young kids. And, I know that we are still at the beginning, and one of the things that I think is really important is recognizing, I know I've been traveling around the state, there are still, a lot of deserts, like childcare deserts, especially in the rural communities. And one of the aspects of my plan really focuses on community wealth building. And the idea of community wealth building is really about how you keep more wealth circulating within your local economy, and this is particularly important for rural economic development. And so this is about how do we support our small businesses, our sole proprietors, cooperatives, and ensure that every community has childcare, as well as small town doctors, small businesses that are thriving, and how do you make the linkages that are going to support that $1 that I'm maybe spending on a child care facility is ultimately going to be used by, crackers from the general store, and they're going to use it to buy, some milk from the local farmer, and all of a sudden that $1 is becoming $3, right? And so this is the idea of ways in which we're not only redistributing money, but we're actually increasing the amount of broad-based prosperity within our rural communities and across the state.
Thank you, Amanda. Our social benefits are definitely high on the list of questions we got, so we'll do another one. Vermont is the only state in New England that does not offer paid family and medical leave assistance. Every surrounding state, New England and New York, currently offers paid leave for new parents, but Vermont only offers an insurance option that many employers do not even offer. This is a strong driver of why Vermont has the lowest birth rate in the US and why many people are moving out of Vermont. Do you support paid family and medical leave in Vermont? And how would you advocate setting up the system?
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy that we don't have paid family leave. It's the same way, as a country, it's quite embarrassing that we don't have, like maternity leave or paternity leave. It's really important that there is, especially in those earlier phases of life, that people are able to spend time with their children. And I think this isn't even just about like access to that leave, but also just recognizing, one of the challenges in Vermont is that 99% of our businesses are small businesses. 72% of our businesses are sole proprietorships, right? And so I think that there is also something about acknowledging, like paid family leave is actually one of those initiatives that is less about, isn't gonna cost you more upfront. I think what a lot more pressure in terms of social benefits is the cost of healthcare. The difference between going from having no employees to having one, in terms of like the healthcare costs, that is a big burden. And so because we've seen like a doubling in our annual premiums, et cetera, the pressure that is being placed, that is also on the other side, I think a big reason why we have some of the lowest wages on average in the surrounding areas. And so this is where, again, we want to think about both the entitlements, because I'm not only for paid family leave, I'm also for going on a 4-day work week. Like, we need more time. We are in a state of time poverty. There's such burnout culture. Like, we need opportunities to connect with one another as communities, as families, but also ensuring that we have the resources, because most people are working multiple jobs to just get by. And so even if you give that on one side, it may end up just having to be picked up on another unless we have the wages that are sufficient for people to get through.
It's so interesting that you say that. Often when people ask, well, what is your real goal for Vermont running? So that folks can live here and enjoy their lives and go on vacation. I feel like if we have an economy that supports folks to have the basic needs met and you actually have a little left behind to go on vacation, isn't that the goal we're all striving for? It's these things are a matter of basic humanity, as is having a baby and having to go back to work. It's a matter of basic humanity. It is so embarrassing. It is a national disgrace that we are one of, I think, 3. When I wrote a research paper about this 10 years ago, it was one of 4 developed nations that didn't have this. And now I think it's one of 3. What are we doing here? So I agree that the best, most robust paid family medical leave program should be national, as should single payer, as should other things. But in Vermont, of course, these are matters of humanity. So we shore up our economy and create more stability for all of us through these bedrock issues of housing and healthcare. We unlock critical things like paid family medical leave. We can find the resources to do these things that are critical for the humans in our state to live and thrive. One hand for yourself, one hand for the ship. Have a great life, enjoy that life that we have to give. And do things like not have to go back to work. I mean, you've probably heard the stories, maybe some of you live them yourselves. I have identical twin boys. I couldn't go back to work. And until 4 months, my brain did not work. That's real. Until 4 months after I gave birth to those amazing boys. They're 7.5 now. And I think about this all the time through my own experience. It is a matter of humanity and it is a national disgrace.
All right. Allie, you'll go first. Just last week, provision S208 in S208 to unmask ICE officers as they violate constitutional rights failed in the state, the House of Representatives in the state. How would you make sure that we unmask ICE? And more broadly, what is your position on protecting Vermonters and our immigrant neighbors from overreach and unlawful detentions from ICE, Border Patrol, and Department of Homeland Security?
These questions reveal the troubling times we live in. These are unprecedented challenges, folks. ICE is an unconstitutional force. We need to protect Vermonters from ICE. That's the bottom line. And I'm so grateful for the Vermont Immigration Defense Fund, the Asylum Project, the ACLU, Migrant Justice. We have a model of a community here that is coordinating together and supporting our neighbors. And we also have a model, police force. Is everybody perfect? I don't think so. And yet, what makes us work together? Transparency, communication, accountability. So I would be having press conferences all the time with all those partners, including the state police, including local law enforcement, with me every single week. We all deserve to know what's happening in our communities, to understand our rights, to know when and where we can. The right to peaceful protest is a basic constitutional right, and to understand what's happening. We don't have enough communication right now. We need harm reduction communication. And I think it is your leader's job, your governor's job, to be having that transparent communication, to be fostering those relationships between all the folks that are supporting our Vermonters. I watched the debate closely, and it was very, very unfortunate that we did not feel like we had the constitutional ability to unmask ICE in Vermont. So now we need to support our local law enforcement to protect Vermonters from ICE. I mean, it's a crazy world that we live in, but that is the situation we are in. And the bottom line is we protect our communities at all costs.
Thank you. Go ahead, Amanda.
I mean, first of all, just in terms of S208, I think it's important because it's similar to the earlier question, which was asked around, are we going to support like a constitutional amendment around corporate funding of elections? And in Hawaii, they went through with it, right? And they know that it might be brought to the higher levels of the court, but this is aligned with their values, and this is what they're going to stand for, and so they're going to stand by it. And I think that that's important that we keep doing that over and over, and that we do not obey in advance, and we do not preemptively say that we're not even going to try, even if we believe that that's what's best for our communities. I also think that this is a moment when we need to stop being as reactive and get a little more proactive. Because unfortunately, this government is not going to stop on its own. That's not how fascism works. And so I think that we need to start joining multi-state coalitions and being a lot more strategic about how we cut off this federal government from a lot of the sources of power. Because ultimately, like step one, we just need to ensure that everybody's safe and secure in their basic needs, right? And that does require us to be strategic in terms of how we collaborate with other states to ensure, for example, like energy, resiliency, or communication infrastructure, etc. But also to use our collective economic power, which is actually quite a lot. Like if you, for example, I'm bringing us into AI, which was not asked, but I see it as very related to this current form of authoritarianism we're experiencing. If you had 3-4 states just divest their pensions from the biggest tech companies, it would crash them. Like we have a lot more power than we're currently utilizing right now, and I think it's important that we start stepping up and thinking a little bit more proactively moving forward.
Thank you. The shortest question we got, it's only 5 words, but I think it's still going to take you 2 minutes to answer. Do you support school consolidation? And the first one's for Amanda.
No. I mean, so I should say, I'm from a small rural town, right, and in Stratford, and I mean, first of all, my issue with the starting point of the school consolidation discussion is that it's a false premise. The argument is that we need to consolidate schools to reduce property taxes. There's no evidence that that will actually reduce property taxes, and again, the actual drivers are healthcare and mental health support for kids, which should be the focus of our attention. Moreover, at least from my experience with my town, school is essential to that community. And once you take away that school, you pretty much give it up on that rural community, which is, I think, what rural folks have been feeling for a while now. And so we need to reinvest in our rural communities and also ensure, for me, I really believe and that this is a moment, especially as we're losing faith in democracy, that the more local decision-making and power that we have, the better. And this is an important area where communities get to determine for themselves what they understand to be best for their children and their communities. So definitely against school consolidation.
I love the 5 words in your 1 word. It reminds me of a President Calvin Coolidge, Silent Cal. He said, someone bet couldn't get you to say 3 words, and he said, you lose. It's one of my favorite Vermont historical lore stories. Yes, look, the way we're having the conversation about education is tearing our communities apart. So in this context, absolutely not. We are not having the right conversation. No one has put the goals on the table. What are the goals? Does anybody know? Are we just reducing property taxes? Are we trying to get every Vermont student in education? By the way, chronic absenteeism. Do we know that 25% of Vermont students are chronically absent from school? How can you teach kids if they're not at school? How come we don't know that? It's very interesting to me. So in this context, absolutely not. It's a total mess, and it's tearing our communities apart. Everyone's having the conversation in a different way with different goals. That's what a shared vision does. If you have a shared vision, you can keep things on the table, you can compromise, you can understand where we're going is hopefully going to benefit all of us and be better than where we are. And so again, for me, it's the value of the excellence of the child's education. And I have a lot of personal experience with this. My dad was a public high school teacher. He was my teacher at Oxbow High School for AP History and English, which was amazing. We just talk about history all the time. And that's the most important thing. I was on the State Board of Education as a 15-year-old student. Remember, Howard Dean appointed me. And just my presence changed the conversation because I was a student experiencing the education we were all talking about. Okay, so forced consolidation in this environment, 100% no. And also, I'm hearing from a lot of communities, they're saying, you know what? We want to have the hard conversations. We actually think we have to close this school. It's hard, but we have to. How about if we weren't bullied? How about if we had some good data from the Agency of Education that we could rely on? And how about a little bit of money to turn it into a community center so it doesn't hollow out our community? That's what I'm hearing from folks when I travel around Vermont.
Right, thank you. Allie, start with you. Unfortunately, you and I share something, which is that our hometowns were devastated by flooding multiple years in a row. So what is your vision for ensuring that Vermont creates climate resilience and is prepared for the effects of climate change, including floods, droughts, and extreme heat?
Oh, yeah, I mentioned this earlier. This is our reality. We can't shy away from it. That's okay. We can tackle it head on. And we know how to do it. We've done it before. And I will say I was right in the middle of the Irene response, traveling all around Vermont when it happened in 2011. And I hate to say it, the state did not show up in the same way with the last few floods that we had, leaving locals to really struggle themselves. Nobody was standing up saying, these are your resources, putting themselves in the line saying, this is what we're all doing, please do this. Go ahead and we will protect you. We will make sure you get the loan, you get the money from the federal government. Here's the instruction manual. So in Montpelier, again, I mentioned earlier, I couldn't put one foot in front of the other. We just passed this major childcare bill and then boom, we lost Montpelier, our state capital. Pretty much lost it, folks. I don't know if you drove through or came through. Nothing in downtown remained. It took months to rebuild, and it's gonna happen again. It's gonna happen again. And so we had to do something locally to know that we could rebuild better, that it wasn't, all hope was not lost. So a bunch of us came together and did this Commission for Resilience and Recovery. And again, folks, it's not rocket science. We actually know what to do. This is what blows my mind. We have so much of what we need in Vermont, as you've heard so much today. We just have to do more of it. We have to coordinate the services. We have to focus up. So we did 3 prongs, and we should be teaching each other, learning from each other. Watershed management, go right to the river, harden our built infrastructure so when it happens again, we're much better prepared. The devastation is much more minimal. And then emergency management. Do a better job when it happens again, making sure folks know what's happening, where to go, what to do. It was a chaotic, lack of communication, no clarity. We can do better on all those things, and we did in Montpelier. And then we brought everyone on the Winooski watershed together. They've never been in the same room together ever. Folks who deal with the watershed along the Winooski, never in the same room together. Imagine what we can unlock when we start coming together and coordinating around our shared priorities, especially with something as urgent as this. Every dollar spent is so well spent because we spend so much money cleaning up. This is such an obvious stitch in time, saves time situation for Vermont.
Thank you, Allie. Amanda.
So in terms of climate resilience, and flood resilience in particular, one of the things I would not do is build houses on wetlands, for example. That I will say Was it your group that brought together the Forest Management Roundtable?
Yes.
Yeah, because I think we've been doing incredible work in our state related to flood, like mitigation and management, but I don't think we're prepared for wildfires. And that is something that I'm very worried about. Yeah. And what the Forest Management Roundtable, I think one of the things that I really appreciate about it is it brought together a really wide, diverse range of stakeholders. So not just like environmental scientists or like forest ecologists, but also like hunters and loggers and people who learn not just about the earth, but also from the earth. And I think that from my experience with Hurricane Irene, I will say that in the midst of a natural disaster, like one redneck is worth like 100 scientists, yeah? They're our first line of defense, and we definitely need to get them more involved around like environmental policy, climate planning, and the natural disaster resilience preparedness.
Thank you. We're going to divert. We have time for 2 more questions. I'm going to divert from all the policy questions and ask a couple of other questions that came in. I'm just still in my head trying to decide which order. I'll do it this order. All right. So it is, I don't think confirmed, but heavily rumored that Governor Scott is running for re-election. He hasn't put in his petitions yet, but we all think he's probably going to. So what do you see as the vulnerability of Governor Scott? And how would you make your case that you're the best leader for the state? And why is this the time that either of you would be able to make an inroad in defeating Phil Scott? And it is Amanda's turn.
Well, yes, we shall find out soon if Phil Scott is running again. But I think the point and the thing that I've been feeling as we've been going across the state, and my motivation as well, is just that we can do better than just like manage decline. We have been in this sort of holding pattern, maintenance of some sort of status quo, and you know, Phil Scott did a great job during COVID, right? But since then, I mean, the cost of living crisis is exorbitant. The management of our public budget has been not great. And our ability to not only deal with the existing like healthcare, housing, rural economic development challenges, but actually prepare for the challenges that are coming down the road requires a different kind of leadership. And I think that we're all just like yearning for something more proactive right now. And it's great to be able to manage a crisis, but what we need is to feel like we collectively have a voice and a power over building a better future to come. And I think that is the energy that I'm feeling, and that is what I think will ultimately get us to a win in November.
Okay, yeah, not great for democracy, 2 days away from the filing deadline. We don't know if the governor's running again. I'll just be clear. We beat Phil Scott before, and we'll beat him again. He overrode, he vetoed the child care bill, which is the one area of positive growth in our state in the last decade, and we did that. We did that with people power, and then he vetoed it. And then we came together with all the Dems, all the progs, a bunch of Republicans, a bunch of independents, and the sole libertarian in the State House, and overrode this popular governor's veto, okay? It can be done. Look, now is the time. Thank you for your service. You've been a steward of Vermont. You did get us through COVID. Thank you for your service. We need an energetic strategic offense. 10 years, the approach is not working. Believe what you will, the approach is not working. Our structure demands the executive branch have a plan, a real long-term strategic plan, multi-years, and use the administration as staff for that plan, as outreach, energetic outreach in communities, stakeholder engagement that's meaningful, data that's real. The legislature is part-time, January through May, 1-year budget cycles, no staff. You think that's a recipe for strategic planning? They can edit, oversight, accountability, detail work, engagement with constituents. Yes, yes, yes. Working from the bones of a good plan that we have not had in a decade. So I think the lack of vision and the chaos, frankly, we've seen, we're not all working towards the same priorities. And now is the moment, folks. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Hope and change echo. Is anyone else feeling it? Better be, because we need it in this country, heaven knows. And so we're gonna see that in Vermont. We're seeing it everywhere else. Okay, the turnout is important. When turnout is high, like we're seeing around the country, we win. We have to believe that we can do better, that our state government can do better. I don't know about you, but at my house, the buck stops on top. So when you're blaming, you're not leading. And it's time for us to demand some real leadership in Vermont.
So, Vermont Conservation Voters, we do, during the legislative session, we do a weekly podcast called The Democracy Dispatch, which Justin Marsh, standing over there, runs, does a beautiful job with. They ask at the end of each podcast some questions, and I got some similar questions here, so I thought I would ask Justin's standard 2 questions to you both. The hard thing is to have one answer for both of these 2 questions. So, one is, I'm changing it slightly, what is a recent candidate that you've supported? Then why did they inspire you? And the second is, what is your favorite place in Vermont? And Allie gets to go first.
I have to say Barack Obama. I really, I worked on his campaign. I agree with his message. I thought his election was gonna help us heal from the things that have ruptured our country from the very beginning. And in some ways it did, but in some ways it actually exposed the true fissures that we have as a community. And that's why I love Vermont. We are better, we can do better in Vermont. Freedom and unity, we can take care of each other in Vermont. Even if we disagree, we can have that same respect for each other's basic dignity here. And that's one person. And then my favorite place in Vermont, there's so many to choose from, but I think in my backyard with my husband and my twins rolling around on the grass, looking at the beautiful landscape all around us.
Thank you. Amanda?
Ooh. So I would probably pick Zoran Mandami. I feel like, what an incredible political force in a moment where I think, at least for myself, I was feeling a lot of despair. And seeing somebody just come out of nowhere, 1% polling, just make it through the primaries, and ultimately win the general, and within their first 100 days, be able to illustrate that all of these things, like when people were canvassing, what they would hear is like, I don't know if what he wants to do is realistic, but I believe that he'll try, right? And he's tried, and it's happening. Right? And so I think that for me, it's like, we don't need to tamper down our ambition right now. Like, my dad worked for the Army Corps of Engineers, and they had this motto during World War II, which was like, the difficult we do now, the impossible will take some time. I think that is the kind of general vibe that we are needing, and I think he was the kind of candidate who brought that in that moment for me. In terms of my favorite location in Vermont, it's gotta be Stratford, because, best. And there's this road in between Stratford and Tunbridge that has the most just incredible vista view of the mountains. And so yes, once I deal with some housing policy, I will hopefully be able to go live back in Stratford and have one of those vista views too.
All right. Well, that's it for the questions. So we do have closing statements from you both. 2 minutes each, starting with Amanda.
Okay, so, well, first of all, I want to thank you all for coming out. It's such a beautiful night, and so you're really committed to the cause, and I appreciate you for that. And I'm really grateful to have had this, because I think it's provided a really great opportunity to get to hear more from both Allie and I, to hear 2 different visions for Vermont. I think one is a lot about, how do we better manage this system that we currently have, and I think for me it's maybe a deeper question, what if the system itself needs to change? And so Vermonters are burnt out, we're working harder than ever and just barely staying afloat. Young people can't afford homes, and everyone's being crushed by healthcare costs. Our communities are threatening. We're going to lose our schools, our local businesses, and I think we're all feeling like we're losing a voice over the future. And ultimately, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling tired of government sort of telling us the best that we can do is just rearrange deck chairs on the Titanic. And know that Vermont can lead and illustrate a different way forward, but that this way cannot be top down, it has to be bottom up. Because in Vermont, like, we still remember something that I think that a lot of this country has forgotten, which is that strong communities aren't built by billionaires or political institutions. They're built by neighbors. It's built by us showing up for each other, by ordinary people having real power and a voice to shape their lives. And so I'm Amanda Janoo, and I'm running for governor because I believe that the solutions to the crises we face are already here in our communities, in our democratic traditions, and in our deep sense of responsibility to one another. And that all we need now is the courage to realize that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that got us here. And the courage to build an economy and democracy that actually work for every Vermonter. So if you believe that too, I hope that we can build it together. Thank you.
Allie, the final words.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Really, this is democracy in action. I just want to say I've been looking at this little bracelet I've been wearing, Allie for Vermont friendship bracelet. A 10-year-old girl made it for me in Montpelier. And it's really cool because we haven't had a female governor since the year I was born. The first and only female governor of Vermont, Madeline Cuna, was sworn in the year I was born. So how cool is it that you have two women up here putting it on the line, fighting for what's right, okay? Fighting for what's right, okay? Competent leadership, some vision. We can hone each other's ideas, we can present different experience, different ideas, but at the end of the day, modeling something that's uniting and not divisive, which is so good for this country, my goodness. I'm really proud to be able to do that together. And I think we're gonna really turn some heads, which is gonna be helpful for the general election when we do that. So I think you got the gist of it. We made a plan before, we can do it again, folks. We can demand results. Nobody thought we could deliver on childcare. Nobody thought. Now that we've sort of taken this big swing, everyone's like, oh sure. No. Nobody thought we could do it. We transformed the state and we can do it again, okay? Let's build those homes, let's invest in rural, let's be a beacon of democracy at the time that we are under attack. We know we can do this in Vermont. One hand for yourself, one hand for the ship, freedom and unity. And the truth is, I'm a racehorse when it comes to this work. I do not stop until you see the results. And I've been around the track a few times, so I know what it takes. So thank you all for being a part of this, for demanding better, for being in the meeting house. And I'm Allie, I'm running for governor of this brave little state, which is my home, because there's so much to do and there is no time to waste. So let's get moving together. Thank you so much.
Well, I don't know about all of you, but I am definitely inspired. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Allie, for your knowledge, your expertise, and most importantly, your passion. Let's just give one big more hand for both. So we got 15 questions tonight. I've got a dozen more on cue cards and on these sheets, and even more than that. So please join us again or watch the live stream for our next forum, which is June 17th in Virgins at the Virgins Opera House. Also look out for a potential Rutland forum that's coming. We may have more. But more importantly, make sure you go out and vote. Mail-in balloting for the primary starts June 27th, which is just around the corner. Obviously, the primary election day is Tuesday, August 11th. With that, thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. Thank you for joining us tonight.